This is so low.
Good evening, everyone. We're so happy that you made it out tonight. And I'm here on the side. I know y'all probably said amazing ladies here on stage. But hello. We're so happy to see you all tonight. We know the rain maybe kind of a dreary day today. I was at home working, staring at the window one time, just like, why? But the weather's nicer. The sun is setting a little later every day. And we are here to celebrate kind of a really special book. And I'm going to read a little bio of our lovely lady.
Here's another mic you can use.
And are you a doctor? I've been following you for seconds. So. That's okay. All right. So hello. I'm sure. I don't think the mics like you tonight. Hello. All right. Hello. Okay, we got to speak into one side. This is great. We're doing great. All right. Good evening, everyone. We're going to try this one more time. I swear we're going to get it. So tonight we are here to explain or to kind of explore Dr. Mai Abdul Rahman's work. And her work really takes off a lot from W.E.B. Du Bois's work and pedagogical framework. And we're going to learn more about what that means and what that looks like. But Dr. Rahman has spent her career analyzing and documenting the intersection between public education and poverty. Her recent research focuses on the limits of dominant political and social structures in the U.S. Her publications include Teaching Outside the Box, Beyond the Deficit-Driven School Reforms, District of Columbia Black Arab American and their And without further ado, y'all, we're going to hear more about the cognitive
Before we take a deep dive into this wonderful conversation that we'll be having with Dr. Rahman, and I'll be very honest and transparent with you. May is my neighbor, so it's going to be very hard for me to code switch. And so we have decided that I will call her May, and she will call me Saleema. Oh, I didn't even see you two sitting here. These are two amazing students in our juvenile justice clinic, Erica Herrera and Shakira Saba, who are both doing amazing work representing the youth in the District of Columbia. So thank you for the work you're doing. I want to kind of cast a broader net before we do the deep dive with May about educational disparity. And so this week, the video was shared with many of us, chose to watch it, some of us chose not to watch it, but the video of Tyree and how that has affected us as families, as individuals, as communities, and I think more significantly, consistently reminding us of the work that has to be done, of the failure of not our youth and our students necessarily, but failures of systems that we often see as being designed to protect us, whether it's the police, whether it's teachers. But we want to make sure that we are not overlooking something that is staring us right in the face when we're talking about issues of disparity. So may we all try to do whatever our part may be in ensuring that racial equality is something that happens on various levels. So I want to jump right in, and as I jump right in, I want to first say that I self-identify as an African-American woman, and probably my most important identity is I identify as a mother of a Black child, who I say as a child, but it's actually 37 now. But I worry about him now as much as I did then. And he reached, I think it's okay that he's allowed me to tell his story. He's been very successful academically. He got his bachelor's from Dartmouth, his law degree from Harvard, his master's from Oxford. And I say that not to brag, but of course mothers are always proud of our children. We always pray for them. But I say that because the stories and the research that May shares in her book is what I've experienced. I come here as a mother more so than as a researcher and as a law professor. My son was tracked all through his school years. He's put in remedial classes without teachers even beginning to assess his academic abilities. So I am interested in this conversation really more from a personal perspective than from an academic perspective, even though I have so many of my students sitting in here. But really, the law is a human experience. Much better, thank you. The law is a human experience, and so these issues are not theoretical to us. They're personal in so many ways. And with that as the kind of starting point, I think the first thing that I think about is, for some, they may see you as white people. And so I say, why are you interested in this book? What made you begin to think about writing this book?
For Black Americans, I probably look and act white, and for white Americans, they know I'm not. So I'm kind of in the middle. I'm really outside of the paradigm in more ways than one. I happen to be a Palestinian, and being a Palestinian, you recognize some of the structures and institutional processes that create differential treatment. And as a Palestinian, it's really through my lens as a Palestinian, and as a mother of African American children. But I have to say this, and say it with all honesty. I do not understand, Hassan, when we first married, he made
Who is Hassan?
Hassan, my husband, of 38 years. When we first married, he made me almost study Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and jazz, all kinds of things. I had to read, and I had to listen, and I had to get into, go to concerts. you know, basically what he was saying is that the African American experience is completely outside of everything you know, May. And so I decided to, after I finished my master's degree, I decided to go and get my doctorate degree at Howard University. And that does not make me any better, actually. There are more questions than answers that I have. But nonetheless, from my lens as an educator, as a researcher, I'm only looking at the structures that I understand as a Palestinian that differentiate between people. And within that lens, I can see and identify some of the structures and institutional processes that many of us have habitually kind of accepted. And so, and that's why I write about it. I write about it because I care about this country. And in more than one way, it explains my situation. I'm an American, but I'm also Palestinian. And it somehow gives me a sense of understanding of how these processes are constructed historically and what it means and their effect, not only as, you know, we talk about this all the time. These systems. And so why am I looking at the school system, for example? Because in fact, discrimination is across all things. I mean, we already know it's in the justice system, it's in police practices, it's in every other criteria, health, financial, is the ability to hold two opposing perspectives. And most researchers look into the tension of working through the differences between the ideal and the practice. For example, opportunity is available for everyone, but and if you can identify the who and the what and the how, you can chart the progress of the future generations as well as society and the century, he says, and the century. He's not alone saying that. Actually, lots of other people have actually picked up that if you can identify the processes and the mechanisms and how they impact the population, then you could see the outcome for the long term. And by doing that, you're setting the stage for all sorts of things, the progress of society, democracy, acceptance of racism. All of that comes from normalizing certain practices.
There's a term that you pretty regularly use in the book called differential policies. And you sometimes talk about differential policies and the relationship between these policies and whiteness. Can you elaborate on that a bit when you talk about the differential policies, what we're looking at when we're saying differential policies?
So there are, the researchers have identified public school systems. I mean, you know, they've looked at thousands and thousands of student outcomes across several school districts and state agencies. And you can actually find all of that. It's publicly on the Department of Education, because every school has to give you know, their annual reports, the numbers of students in jail, the number of students arrested, the number of students held back, and so on and so forth, their outcomes. And you could see you know, it's based on color, it's based on gender, homeless or you know, housed. All of these criteria are available. And is that John? That's the man who keeps all that data. John McLaughlin. So all of this data is available. It's not hidden in any place. And it's so researchers go back and they look through the data, and they've identified a specific policy, school policy, where Black students, for example, in 2019, 16% of the public school population was Black, yet 31% of them were arrested in school. A total of 35,000 students were arrested in school. One researcher identified a school district where half of the Black student population was arrested in school by police. And many of these kids are 5 to 6 and 7 years old. And that began, you know, so they termed this the school to prison pipeline. So these are identifiable, researched indicators of a whole lot of acceptance to certain policies. And what I'm saying is this: all of this is done while, you know, for example, there is a benign policy. It's called zero tolerance. We want our kids to be safe. And who would disagree with that? But safe from whom is the question. And so when you target only Black students repeatedly, what are you saying to the white students? How are the conceptual idea of Blackness and whiteness, what does it mean to the teacher, to the principal, to the parents, and to the student body? Who are we protecting ourselves from? A 5-year-old being handcuffed. I'm not the only one saying this. This is established research. So I'm just saying, like, you know, some of those policies, when you look at the federal government means a lot of goodwill. So they come up and they said, since 1950s, they've been asking for the reformation of the school system. And so they have all of these policies and they put on all of these things, and we have to make sure that these kids are learning. And this is, you know, by third grade, in 2001, we're going to eradicate illiteracy in the United States and so on and so forth. But it doesn't happen. And the question is why? Why doesn't it happen with all of that goodwill behind it? Lots of money thrown at the schools. Why doesn't it happen? Because there is structural bias that we have been carrying on our shoulders since the history of slavery, that we've not been able to remove. And once we understand that in some ways, all we are doing is repeating and recycling and maintaining the status quo. And I argue this is not good for the United States. This is not good for our democracy. This is not good for for our nation. It's totally anti, against all of our moral principles, because in principle, all of us believe we want equality. We want all of us to do well, but why aren't we doing well? And so those are the questions that I ask. And I also identify some ways of creating solutions. Do you want to ask me something else?
Well, I actually want to circle back on your profound statement and research on the school to prison pipeline. And my students, we often talk about students who are detained in the District of Columbia or detained at what's referred to as DYRS, Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services. In any given year, how many Black students are in DYRS? 95%. And in some years, how many? 100%.
Yes.
So in any given year, 95 to 100% of the students who are youth who are detained at DYS and DC are African American. And I think it goes back to the information that you're sharing about the school to prison pipeline. It doesn't mysteriously happen that these, quote, students are bad kids, but we have the pipeline from the school system. And this word that you use that seems so simple, but I think it's so fundamental, care. I don't need my students to like me, but I'm gonna care about their success. Isn't it? Teachers, right? I don't need you to like me. It's like a parent. You don't need your children to like you, but we're gonna care about your success. And this idea of caring that you mentioned of what can turn it around. But I also wanna go back to what felt like a very foreign concept to me when I read your book, this idea of truly pushing towards a democracy that, I'm just gonna say racism against Black children. I never thought that I'd be sitting here thinking even about what you're saying, but that it defeats the democracy because it's also beginning to harm the inner core of who we are. Can you kind of build on that a little bit for us? Because well, I think that's, like you said, it's something we don't often talk about and something that doesn't feel like the essence of what we want to talk about. So I'd love to hear more about that concept of.
Well, I think racism is hostile to democratic principles because it assumes a certain positioning. One is inferior and one is superior. And democracy is where all of us have an opportunity. We may not be equally successful, but we all have a chance at the minimum to be able to read and write and to be functional and to manage our lives. And right now in Maryland, where we have all these wonderful universities, 80% of us are literate and 20% of us are illiterate. And chances are most of them are Black and brown. So how can Saudi Arabia have 99% literacy rate and the United States, in a state that houses so many schools, have 80% literacy rate? It's unconscionable. And where does it begin and why do we accept it? So those are, and how could we thrive as a democracy? I mean, all the founding fathers, that's what they talked about, equal opportunity. Education enlightens people to make the right decisions in a democratic state. If we do not have enough enlightened people who can read and write, express themselves, are active participants, how do we expect them to really value our democracy? And I'm not saying, most people think, I'm talking about Maryland, but in West Virginia, it's exactly the same and it's reversible. Most of them are white in West Virginia. They're not Black. So this is a problem all over the country. It crosses. Poverty exacts the same harms on individuals and families, whether they're Black or white. But most of us are aware of, depending on our perspective, we're not really aware of the need to address it conclusively across all classes and races. Because most, DuBois said that for white people who are poor, that sense of privilege is so important that they don't want to lose it by raising their finger and saying, you know what, I don't have access to hospitals, which they don't right now. Poor white people are the largest population in prisons. But we need to advocate for change, a really structural change all across. But at the same time, the way to do it is to unite, irrespective of our race and color, to unite together to really create a social movement to advance the interests of all of us instead of some of us. As long as we are, exclusive, whether it's in education or exclusive, it harms us all in the long run. It's not going to be good for us in the long run. And it's obvious already. We're tearing at the seams, and researchers are really interested in this. A lot of social scientists are looking at this. So this is the democracy for the world. We are the example of democracy in the world, and yet racism is so rampant.
Dr. Abdul-Rahman, I'm going to have to you became Dr.
Okay.
Abdul-Rahman now.
Now, Dr. Abdul-Rahman.
Dr. Abdul-Rahman. So I practice law in rural Georgia. But I practice law in rural Georgia, representing various very poor white clients of the legal services attorney. I cannot say that the outcomes were the same for my Black clients and my white clients. I cannot say that the outcomes were the same for my Black clients as they were for my white clients. Poverty, yes, is real. We need to close the justice gap for all communities. I agree with you on that 200%. However, my white clients would appear in court before white judges, and there would be a different level of empathy. My Black clients would appear in court before the same white judges, the same very analogous facts. My white clients, if it was a housing eviction case, the judge would say, well, I know it's been hard getting work. Let's see if we can give you a little bit more time to get the money together. My Black clients, there are stigmas, and the stigmas that I think you raised in your book. The tropes of being a welfare queen, the tropes of being lazy, and those stigmas are the things that still, despite the similarities that we may have when it comes to poverty, race often trumps everything. And I believe that's part of your theory in your book, that race is trumping in the school systems, but the importance of also recognizing the harm, generational harm, that is even perpetuated in how we continue racism when children are exposed to the norms of Black children basically not being enough in those white settings. So I want to make sure, because you told me, make sure we save time for lots of questions.
Yes.
So I want to make sure we save time for lots of questions. But before we do that, we actually have the artist who is the cover of the book. And I think I would love for her to come up.
Use this mic.
Yeah, don't use mine.
I just want to say racism, is detrimental to all of us. And so it doesn't matter. I want it, there's no question about it, that the victims are, African Americans are more victimized than anyone else, just like as the Palestinians are. But I, from my own experience as a Palestinian, I really believe the young Israelis who do wrong to the young Palestinians are also repeating their forefathers' ways of thinking, and they're harming themselves and harming their society in the long term. So in my opinion, racism needs to be completely erased for the wellness of both communities. But most, of course, the bigger victim is, of course, the African American child. Okay.
Hi. Did you have a question, or you just want me to?
I'd like you to explain this.
Okay. So my name is Iman Abdul Ali. I'm Dr. May's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And she asked me if I could design the cover for her book, which I was really eager to do and excited to do because she always lets me read and edit and go through her book with her whenever she's writing. And this time I was really excited about most of the time, but this time I was especially excited because she was very militant in her writing in a way that I kind of felt like she had been holding back before. So I kind of wanted to emphasize that, and I wanted her book to be one that people had to stop and look at because it was different when they were scrolling on Cambridge's website. So to do that, I chose to make the flames kind of come all over the book, kind of to be more so a representation of this being a smaller section of a larger problem that we're facing that has greater effects, and to give a dystopic kind of feel. But I also wanted it to be kind of like indicative of the feeling that I felt also as a teacher, where it's kind of, this is kind of dramatic, but you guys see school buses that are driving off of cliffs and exploding in flames. It's kind of how I felt as a teacher, is just that helplessness of, I want to be the best that I can be for these students when I'm with them in their day-to-day, but I kind of know that this system is not setting them up for success. As somebody who's gone through public school system, it was cognitive dissonance for me as well to be in that position where I want my students to be the best versions of themselves, but I kind of know that they're not going to be appreciated in that way by my fellow teachers, by even their peers who are, I think like one line that you have in the book is, "This is a white problem." Am I quoting that exactly? And that's why the cliffs that you see are like white, because when you're allowing other young, impressionable minds to see Black students as lesser than at such an early age, where maybe you might do the same thing and not get in as much trouble as another student, that has a perverse effect on you for the rest of your life, where you will begin to internalize racism. And it's not something like, maybe further down the line, you might be like, man, people keep telling me that I'm treating people a certain way and I'm taking them for granted as human beings. And you don't know where it started. It started from when you were a young age, when you saw your peers get in trouble, be handcuffed for things that you were doing with your friends. So there's some gold stars, because I feel like that's the way the education system is treated. Like, everybody's striving for gold stars. And in terms of like data, as teachers, we're rewarded when we're able to get good data out of our students, but there's not much time in the day to spend time thinking about the needs of your students beyond the 15 minutes that you actually have with them. So this one hit home for me. So I really wanted it to be something that people, when they were looking, if the title was a lot for them because they added those extra words at the end to spend time with, they'll have to stop and be like, what's going on? A lot of the book covers that I saw were graphically designed, so I wanted to make something with my hands so people would be like, what's, what is this? And as an art teacher, the 7 elements of art are really important when you're trying to create like a good composition. So that's, I'm gonna educate you guys real quick. Line, color, shape. Line, color, shape, texture. Why am I blanking? Space, form, and value. And in this case, value would be black and white, but when I would talk to my students, I would talk to them about that too. Like, who decides the value in our society? And I felt like in this instance, there's a lot that we can talk about from the context of art, just in the way that I put together this composition. So yeah, that's how I that's how I interpreted it.
So when the publisher contacted me and they said we have these designers, cover designers, and so on and so forth, and I'm like, no, I think Iman will do a good job. So I said, I think I have my own designer, and then they allowed it, and so since then, a lot of researchers have really been interested in the design, and many of them have visited her website on my website. So she's getting a lot of traffic and a lot of questions about her work. So I'm really excited and I'm really happy she did this for me. Yes, please. Could you please ask me your questions? Yes. So, so can I repeat what you're saying? That you're putting the social emotional context within your curriculum based on, kind of positive energy but you're saying it doesn't. No. You know what I'm saying? And really, it's more structural than that, I think. So I just want to make sure I'm getting the nuance from your. So for almost a decade, all I did was study youth homelessness. And one of the things that I advocated for was the resiliency, leveraging the resiliency and the positive characteristics of these kids. They're problem solvers. They know how to find resources. When there is a hard situation, they figure out how to get around it. And so leveraging those assets in order for them to succeed in school. And of course, now we're teaching resiliency. We talk about resiliency in everything. But here we have a group of students, because of the situational problems that they have, not of their making, but just because of the social order of things, they already have a set of skills to overcome so many obstacles. If we could leverage that with what they have and believe in them, I think, they will succeed on their own. It is fascinating to find out the numbers of how many, with all of the problems. I mean, homeless kids are like the worst of the worst, right? No resources, no family, nothing, no residential security. They go from school to school to school, shelter to shelter. They don't have enough food. They don't eat right. And yet they're amazing. How do those kids still go to college, still manage to finish high school? And that's within a lot of our kids that sometimes are, their social situations are very difficult. You'll find that they have a lot of smart skills that you could leverage to advance them and to create a better future for them. We all come with a lot of skills already. And children, all you need is really to kind of tease it out and give them the confidence that they have the ability to make it. I cannot stress how important it is developing relationships, real, sincere, authentic relationships. I think kids would forgive us if we make a mistake and own to it, rather than manipulate situations, and because they know our flaws already. If we're sincere in our exchange, things really move forward in a way that are much more accelerated than otherwise. I hope I answered the question.
I'd like to jump in a little bit here too. I would first find out if they're policing the schools, which will be camouflage with school resource officers. When you want to erode the school equipment pipeline, it often begins with not having police officers in the schools. And that's very controversial, but you said superintendent, and superintendents are the ones who can make that choice. If you're talking about students, particularly Black students, coming from neighborhoods where police have not been there for them, and now you're asking them to trust someone in their school, and you're asking them to have someone who cares for them. I have never seen this person care for me. And you're asking me to live up to my potential, but you've replicated a police state from a neighborhood where I can't live up to my potential.
So I definitely think thinking about school resource office, what kind of culture does that create within our schools?
Please keep your mic.
I'm one of those people who were very, with school reforms and everything else, and with the manner by which police are perceived right now, and the harshness in the way they treat kids and so on. Not just kids, adults. And I was very adamant that we should not have any police officers in the schools. And then you hear the other side, and parents actually think that some police are positive influence on their kids. And teachers say that there is another person who's an adult who's building a relationship and sustaining a relationship for the long term from year to year, where they see them and they care about them and so on. I think everything, when we talk about it, it's not always absolute. Always, it's like situational and context. It's the quality of the person and the quality of the exchange and what kind of procedures are allowed and how do they communicate to the kids and whether they are part and parcel, really sincerely engaging and helping, or are they there to incriminate and, hold, in cuffs and take out? I mean, it all depends on how we see the world. Because right now, I think we're both on the police committee here in this city, and we're struggling trying to figure out how do we move forward with the, police reforms. I can tell you, from our exchanges, there's some who are really authentic, genuine, and really kind, and they come across as really wanting to develop better relationship and better protocols and so on. And I'm not saying all of them are good, some of them maybe not, but those some need to be, that the sum is what creates all of the problems, and those are, when it is egregious, it's really egregious because of the power status between the citizen. It doesn't make sense for us to be afraid of the people who protect us. It does not make sense for a school officer to be in a school for the intent of protecting children where children are fearing them. If that is the case, then you don't want that police officer there. Another question? Yes, Ron. Race theory from classroom. For testing, I mean, right now, a lot of people are looking at how the tests are devised. And I also look at how teachers teach to the test. And within those methodologies, the teacher is not going to be, if you have 40 kids in a classroom and the teacher is being rated on how well she does in her performance, she's going to concentrate on the kids who are going to show her skills that she has improved. And so if there's somebody who's like below average, she's going to sacrifice that child and concentrate on the ones that she can move up a little bit. It's just a natural instinct. This is why I believe that with all of the good intentions of school reforms, they are rigged against Black students, not intentionally, but the way they are administered. It's a job after all, and it's a salary, and you want to make improvements. And when the teacher can improve her stats, the school also benefits and the district benefits. So it's rigged against the students who need more time. And this is why education is I say education is a deliberate exercise, not a quantitative exercise. Now, if you could spend a little more time on these kids and give them more support chances are they're going to do well. But you don't have those options with so many tests coming in and evaluations and so much is riding on it. So a lot of times, they segment the kids. I mean, I've been a teacher and I know exactly how it works. You segment the kids and you kind of say, the ones in the back, I'm not going to work on. The ones in the front, I already know they're doing well. I'm going to concentrate on the ones in the middle. And it's a natural, a selective process. And it doesn't take a lot of thinking to manage that. But saying that as well, how do you create, that the teachers and the students are prepared before they get there? So we talk about third grade as the critical grade. We have to teach first kindergarten, and literacy has to begin from the very beginning. And you can't have it with large classes. You have to instill in every school district the need for smaller classes. Mediocre teachers can do better with smaller classes than with large classes. We cannot all have the best of teachers in every classroom. Some classrooms are not going to have the most brilliant and most effective teacher. You have to help teachers teach. And if it becomes a problem, then you have to address those situations as they come. In the District of Columbia, actually, they're doing much better right now because they concentrated and focused on the younger elementary grades. And so their stats are getting better. And there was a time when they were the worst. So you have to understand also that Black students in particular do not get all of so when they are covering the test, they teach to the test, Black students are often without that ability to be taught on the test. They're kind of ignored, and so they fail at it anyway. Because most teachers are teaching for the test. And so if you're teaching for the test and you're only concentrating on those kids who you think are going to do better, you're going to encourage the rest of them not to take the test, to be absent on the day that the test is going to be given, they are systematically ignored because there's so much at stake on the testing. But I do believe, I had to be tested in 5th grade, I had to be tested in 7th grade to even move to the 8th grade, and I had to be tested in 12th grade. But that was, that's how the international system works. In the United States, it works differently. But what does that mean? I had to be able to read and write. So if 3rd grade does not do it, maybe make it in 5th grade. Instead of give the kids a little more time to be able to comprehend, read, and write. But as it is right now, we're failing them. Now, the second question was critical race theory. I think most people, when you tell them not to teach something, they're going to teach it more. But maybe you can make that into a law, but a lot of people, I don't know, I think it's a silly argument. I don't know. We have to know, how do we move forward if we don't know our past? How do we go beyond the limits that we've created if we don't know how these limits were constructed to begin with? It's just, I think it's just a fad, and I think it will go away in due time, because it's good for all of us to really learn our past and learn from the past, so that we will continue repeating the cycle as long as we do not address our past. Oh, you don't want it. Okay.
I just wanted to briefly say that I actually teach critical race theory at UDC's law school. And the first problem with challenging the teaching of critical race theory is most people don't know what it is. And I think May just said, it's really just teaching what our history actually is. All first-year law students at UDC Law School, they read The Color of Law, which memorializes racial discrimination in housing. And so it's not just Professor Snow standing up there ranting and raving about racism and when I grew up in Boston. it is memorialized in the book that the public housing unit that we moved into, that we were not allowed to live there until they were forced by HUD to integrate that housing authority that was saved exclusively for white families. And so, I think sometimes we think that these issues happened so long ago. I realize I'm getting older than I realize. But understanding that critical race theory is simply that, showing how race has affected all of our laws in so many ways. And I cannot help but to recognize the Dean of UDC Law School who is here, Dean Toinette Johnson. So yay, thank you, Dean Johnson, for joining us, who actually is also very deeply does research in the area of education and disparities. Other questions for May, for Dr. Abdul Rahman? Comments too? Yes.
For Black children, family is used against them. So for Black children in particular, many teachers believe that they're not going to be supported at home, that education is devalued by African American families, which is completely untrue based on research. None of that is true. And so a lot of times there is an assumption that families are not invested in the education of their kids. I've never my mother never read a book to me, never. I never remember her reading a book to me, but she always valued education. And she told me that unless I get a terminal degree, which is my doctorate degree, I'm not educated. So just because a family does not have the same education as another family doesn't mean that they're devalue education. For African Americans, it's the way out of a lot of things, It's the way out of poverty. They're invested in their education. If you just meet them halfway, they will get where they need to. But you have to meet them halfway. When we talked about the school to prison pipeline, the school to prison pipeline affects 70% of these kids. The likelihood of them going into prison is more than any other child. We're setting these kids for failure with the policies and with our lack of tolerance, lack of understanding, and our inability to really comprehend the affected community. To address these problems, you have to know how it feels from the prism of a young Black child looking at his teacher, treating him differently, or if he wanted to sit in the back, saying, yeah, go ahead and sit in the back, while others, it's, no, you have to sit in the front. And so how do these kids see themselves? They see themselves as irrelevant, that they're not valued, that they don't mean much to the adult. And then you look at the other kids and how they view them. I'm just saying, you ask a fairly straightforward answer. How do these families help their children? You just by valuing education, you're helping your child, and make it possible for them to communicate how they are affected by the policies that the schools are creating. If you do not understand the effects of these policies on these kids from the perspective of the families, you're never going to end them. Because once I tell you, You know, this is really difficult on us. What you're doing is you're creating this schism in society, and you're putting us aside, and I don't see you valuing my son. If I can say that with all honesty, then the teacher will probably understand, okay, wait a minute, maybe I need to be a little bit more sensitive, and maybe I need to change the way I articulate and how I address my students and how I present my values to the students at large, whether they're maybe Black or white, and how do I engage with my Black students. If we understand the Black perspective, the affected community, I think we're more than likely to change our ways. Because we're, you know, if we know that we could be, you know, I am not racist, you could say that, but you have to act in an anti-racist way. Just saying I'm not racist is not enough. You have to actively engage in anti-racist policies and the applications of these policies. So what do? You go to the school and you scrub all the things that make the treatment of some kids versus others differently. You look at anything that would separate these kids apart. You make sure that they're all collectively educated in the same manner and the same way. And it can be done. I mean, those are policies. We make policies. We could change policies. And schools are incubators of these ideas. This is where they begin, and then the housing and the social justice and the prisons and all of that follow. But schools are the incubators of some of the most detrimental practices, because you cannot treat kids differently, period. It's not only unfair, it's cruel.
It's so interesting when I hear educators, when they say differentiation, that you said it and it was a negative connotation, and I've heard it all my life. For a long time I've been in education. Differentiation was supposed to be the great thing. Differentiation was the way you kind of paid close attention to who the individual was and managed the classroom in such an appropriate way. And now it's a shift in my thinking that differentiation could actually be, if you had put that in this room, I probably wouldn't feel as good about it. But when you said it in the classroom, it didn't sound right for me all this time. And so it's kind of interesting.
So disparate and differential treatment are, differential means like you prefer, there are two sets of policies. One for Black, exclusively Black, and one for all other students. And that is a term, a research term for disparate school policies. Two sets of policies. So that's what we're talking about. We're not talking, instructional differentiation is like helping one kid rise up a little bit, making sure that the gifted students are ahead. No, that's not what I'm talking about. And I'm talking about the differential treatment and the disparate treatment of two groups of students. And it's all based on color. Yes.
Okay, because you also gave the example in the classroom, it's natural for a teacher to, pay attention to this one, leave this group completely alone.
Is it natural?
Well,
Not in teaching. I don't think it is natural for teachers to do that. I think a teacher must engage all her students. Yes. Oh, there is a principle amongst us. So it's slightly different, but I don't think that, like for example, in Finland, I don't think they have a policy where, you know, you engage only the kids who are in the front and just leave the ones who are in the back. That wouldn't happen. Otherwise, they wouldn't be #1 in the world. You know, we're at the lowest bottom among industrial nations, and it behooves us to ask why. Because we drag everybody down. When you're not working with everyone, you drag everyone down. Yes, Robert. Yes. Yeah, this is not, what I argue is that all of this is correctable, and the charter schools are without any, I mean, now some of them are getting public funding, and so there is a little more scrutiny. But in the past, they were not even obligated to provide any data or information. And so they're really a serious threat to public schooling. But if you look at their numbers, a lot of African Americans are moving into the charter schools. And so it's important to ask why. Why is that? Why are they leaving the public school system? Because the public school system is creating a lot of trauma. It's like going to school is traumatic for a lot of Black students. It's a lot of tension. It's a lot of, and very few people really understand that, because most people think that schools are a haven, they're a place of comfort, but not for Black students.
We're down to about 5 minutes. I just wanted to make sure we have a chance to acknowledge our youngest audience member. We'll come to your question in 2 seconds then. Our youngest audience member is Don, who's 7 years old. Don, yay. Don, what grade are you in? What grade? What grade are you in? 2nd grade. And who's your teacher? Miss Blue? And your favorite class? What's the favorite thing you do in her classroom? What is it? PE, my guy. That's my guy right there. I think we have time for one last question. Thank you, Don, for sharing. One last question at the back there.
You're saying it resonates? Oh, alhamdulillah. So I'm sorry, you're very faint, but you're saying that some kids need extra support. You know, I have not. I really concentrate and focus on how to eradicate. This is my 2nd book. My 1st book basically talked about the value, and this is why I was talking about caring, the value of caring for teacher and student. In this book, I talk about the institutional and structural constructs that keep students apart and that lead to, the differentiation of treatment in the classroom, and then it's in the school, and then it's in the social order, and then it's overall society, and how we normalize it by living with it and accepting it. But somebody here may have an answer. I think the principal will probably have an answer. Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I think this is a question for all the mothers here. Uh, there's Sally and I here, and I'm sure a lot of other mothers. We've invested a lot of time on the soccer field to give our kids all the confidence in the world so that they don't have to prove themselves in any other way. And, to go back and, to put all of that energy, learn how to work together, teamwork, responsibility for your action, all of these skills that they learned on the field were translated in the classroom. I think you will find a lot of mothers actually understand the value of extracurricular activities. And if the schools maybe will appoint, a sincere effort to that, I think that would really benefit a lot of kids to be able to be skillful at something, learn from it, being a follower and a leader, making decisions on your own and executing decisions together. All of these skills are really important and they can improve outcomes. John, do you have anything else to say? No, he has a lot. Excuse me? I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. Just such a wonderful audience. I hope there's a lot that I would have loved to have shared with you. It's in the book. But maybe I'll have another chance. And if I do, please join me again. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Saleema. You were so wonderful. You kept me in line. I want to say thank you to Lori. She was my hidden gift. That's what I call her. She's the one who arranged everything. I also would like to thank Andy Shalal. I would like to thank the staff of Busboys and Poets. You guys are wonderful. I want to thank everyone here, all my friends, and you made my day. Thank you.